The following sermon is from the collected works of David Clarkson, who lived from 1621 to 1686. The sermon is based on Luke 13, verse 6. He came and sought fruit thereon, and found none. Of Christ seeking fruit and finding none. These words are part of a parable, the occasion of which we may find in the former verses. Some there present told Jesus what had befallen those Galileans whom Pilate had slain at the altar, and sacrificed them while they were sacrificing, and so mingled their blood with the blood of the beasts that they were killing for sacrifice. He, willing they should make good use of this, would have them to apprehend the danger themselves were in, and thereupon to break off their sins by repentance, lest some sudden stroke falling upon them they should perish in impenitency. And because he foresaw they might evade this, by imagining they were in no such danger, upon a supposition they were in no such guilt as those Galileans, he shows them the vanity of these imaginations, and tells them plainly they had guilt enough upon them to ruin them, unless they repented, verses 2 and 3. And that he might make the deeper impression on them, he repeats it under another instance of a like nature in verses 4 and 5, as if he had said, "Do not think yourselves secure, upon a conceit that your sins are less than theirs, who are thus surprised by death and judgment. You have sin enough to destroy you, unless you prevent it by repentance." And having told them that, unless they repented, they should also perish, it might be inquired how they should perish. To which he seems to answer by this parable, they would perish as the fig tree did, which being planted in a commodious place, a vineyard, and having all advantages to render it fruitful, yet continued barren, whereupon the owner of it, after all means used to improve it, and the exercise of patience year after year, in expectation of some fruit, meeting with nothing but disappointments, resolves it shall cumber the ground no longer, but gives order to have it cut down. This is the sum of the parable, and the meaning of it is this: those persons who are planted under the means of grace, and have all helps and advantages requisite to make them spiritually fruitful, they ought to bring forth the fruit of the Spirit. The Lord, who has so planted and privileged them, expects it of them. And if they answer not his expectation, he may bear with them for some years, while his servants, those who labor in his vineyard, the ministers of the gospel, are taking pains with them, and using all means proper for their improvement. But if, after all this, they continue still barren, he will have them cut down. They shall have a standing no longer in his vineyard. No more care and pain shall be lost upon them. They shall not encumber the ground any longer, nor possess a place on which others being planted would bring forth fruit. In short, they shall be destroyed. The words I have chosen on are the beginning of the parable, which affords us this observation. Those who enjoy the means of fruitfulness should bring forth fruit. Those who are planted in the Lord's vineyard and have it standing under the means of grace should be fruitful. This is clear in the words, and indeed in every part of this parable. Number 1, they are planted in a vineyard for this purpose. That is a proper place for fruit trees. Another place in the vineyard would serve them if they were not set there for fruit. Number 2, the Lord, who gives them place here, expects it. He is said to come and seek fruit, verses 6 and 7. It is that which he has just cause to look for. Number 3, he heinously resents it when he finds no fruit, and expresses his resentment to the dresser of his vineyard. It is an abuse of his patience. The longer he bears with such barrenness, the more it is abused. It is a provocation that he will not bear long with. After 3 years' forbearance, he passes that severe sentence: cut it down. Number 4, It is an injury to the place where they stand. They cumber the ground. That is the reason of the sentence. Verse 7. It takes up that room which might be better employed. It sucks away that moisture which would make others fruitful. It overdrops the plants that are under it. It hinders the spreading and the fruitfulness of others. A better improvement might be made of the ground. It is a loss to the owner of the vineyard when such a plant is allowed, which may signify the spinning the heart of the ground to no purpose. Verse 7. Number 5. Those who have most tenderness for such can have no ground to seek a long forbearance of this barrenness. The dresser of the vineyard will venture to beg no more forbearance than 1 year. After that, he yields it up to excision, verses 8 and 9. Number 6. All labor and pains, all care and culture, in digging about and dunging it, is lost upon it. Those whom the Lord employs to use all means for their improvement have nothing left them in the issue, but occasion of sad complaint, that they have labored in vain, spent their strength for naught. Isaiah 49:4. Number 7. Such will certainly be ruined. Where fruit is not found, nothing can be expected but cutting down. The Lord of the vineyard will not spare them, and the dressers of the vineyard will no longer intercede for them. All in a little while agree in that fatal conclusion: cut it down. All these, in each of them, make it evident that those who are planted under the means of grace are highly concerned to bring forth fruit. The most pertinent and profitable inquiry for further clearing of this truth will be what fruits it is they should bring forth, what we are to understand by fruit, and that fruitfulness which is so much our duty. And of this I shall give you an account by the quality, quantity, and continuance of it. To these heads we may reduce those severals in which the Scriptures express to us what this fruit is. First, for quality, it must be good fruit. Grapes, not wild grapes, as the prophet expresses in a parable very like to this, Isaiah 5:2 and 4. Wild grapes are for the wilderness, not for the Lord's vineyard, Matthew 3:10 and 7:19. Good fruits are acts of goodness, taken acts largely as comprising words, thoughts, actions, motions inward and outward. Acts of goodness opposed to sinful acts. And these causes we have specified in Scripture, which I shall briefly touch. Number 1, as to the efficient. Good fruits are called fruits of the Spirit, Galatians 5:22, Ephesians 5:9. Such fruits as the Spirit of grace helps us to bring forth by sanctifying the heart, where else is no soil fit to bring forth good fruit, and influencing, moving in it, and act in it when it is sanctified. The selfish and earthly are no good fruits, as their carnal, selfish, and earthly are no good fruits. The fruits of the Spirit are good fruits, and those only. Number 2, as to their matter and form, good fruits are such as are called fruits of holiness and righteousness. They are acts of holiness, Romans 6:22, taken in that latitude as comprising godliness, sobriety, and righteousness, according to the apostles' distribution, Titus 2:12. Then we bring forth good fruits when we live soberly, righteously, and godly. Acts of piety towards God and acts of justice towards men, and acts of sobriety towards ourselves are the good fruits we should bring forth. These are called fruits of righteousness, that word being also taken largely as containing all that we owe to God, to others, to ourselves. And as to the form, then they are good fruits when produced in a way and manner conformable to the rule of holiness. When thoughts and inclinations and designs, affections and words, and actions are ordered by that rule, then we bring forth fruit unto holiness. When we think and intend and affect and speak, and act in such a manner as the rule of righteousness requires, then we bring forth the fruits of righteousness, the good fruits which we ought to bring forth. Number 3 is to the end. Good fruit is such as is brought forth to God. Romans 7:4. Then we bring forth fruit to God when what we think and speak and act is in reference to Him, out of obedience to His will, with an intent to serve Him, out of a desire to please Him, with a design to honor Him. When the serving and pleasing and glorifying and enjoying of God is the end of all, a special goodness is by this derived upon all our fruit. It is then brought forth unto God. When we bring forth fruit unto sin, unto the flesh, unto the world, that is cursed fruit. When we bring forth fruit to ourselves, that is no fruit in God's account. Accordingly, Israel is called an empty vine, because she brought forth fruit to herself. Hosea 10, verse 1. They are empty trees that have no other fruit. It is none, or as good as none. No good fruit that is brought forth to ourselves. That is only good which is brought forth to God. More particularly, that it may be good fruit, it must be, first, real. A show, an appearance of fruit will not suffice. If it is not real, it has not a metaphysical goodness, much less a moral or spiritual one. The fig tree in the gospel made some show of fruit, but Christ, finding none upon it really, He cursed it, and it withered. Matthew 21:19. It must not be like the apples of Sodom, which has nothing to commend it, but only a fair outside. Fair appearances may delude men, and pass for better fruit with them than that which is good indeed. But God is not, cannot be mocked. It is He that comes to seek fruit, and it is not the fairest shows that will satisfy Him. It must be real. Secondly, it must be such as imports a change of the soul that brings it forth. Fruit worthy of another mind, another soul than he had before. The tree, i.e., the heart, must be good before it can bring forth good fruit. But naturally, it is an evil and corrupt tree and grows wild. It must be transplanted into another soil, or engraft into another stock, that the nature and quality of it may be changed, that its fruit may be good, else that which it brings forth will be wild grapes, corrupt fruits, not such as the Lord of the vineyard comes to look for. Your natures must be changed. Your hearts must be renewed. Your souls must be taken off from the old stock in which you were born and have continued, and engraft into Christ before your fruit can be good. John 15:4 and 5. The old soil of nature brings forth nothing but briars and thorns, such as is near to cursing, whose end will be burned, as the apostle in Hebrews 6, or at best to bring forth nothing but fine weeds. The best thoughts and actions of an unregenerate person, how goodly or specious soever they may seem to himself or others, are but splendida peccata, gilded evils, or sins of a better gloss. The soils of your natures must be quite altered by renewing grace before it can produce anything good in the account of God. Regeneration is as necessary before good fruit, indeed, as natural life is before Action. You must be born again before you can bear good fruit. Thirdly, it must be distinguishing fruit, such as no trees can bring forth but those that are good, and such as will make their goodness apparent. Matthew 7:16 and 20. To be trees such as may approve you to God in your own consciences, to be trees of righteousness, the planted of the Lord, and such as may make this known of men too, so far as by visible acts it may be known. Such as may carry a conviction with them to the consciences of others, that you are indeed what you profess yourselves to be, such as will leave them no just exception against it. 1 Peter 3:16. Such fruits as no formalist, no hypocrite, no mere moralist can show. Something singular, that you may not be nonplussed with that question. What singular thing do ye? Something more, something above and beyond, not only what the men of the world do, but what common professors can reach. Such by which you may be known to be not only new creatures, but of some proficiency in the knowledge of Christ, and the course of practical godliness according to your standing, such as will demonstrate to the world that you are holy, humble, mortified, self-denying, public-spirited, heavenly-minded, truly crucified to the world, and have not only a form but the power of godliness, that you do not only profess this, but are this. Fourthly, the fruit must be seasonable. That it may be good fruit, it must be brought forth in due season. Psalm 1. Matthew 21:41. The Lord of the vineyard looks for fruit in a season. Mark 12:2. Luke 20:10. There is a season for everything. Ecclesiastes 3:1. And then, if ever it is good words are good fruit when they are in their season. But there is a time when they are not good fruit. And that is the time the apostle speaks of in James 2:15 and 16. Good words alone are not at this time good fruits. In such a case they are not in season, for this is the season for good works. So good thoughts are good fruit when in season, when we are called to meditation, but not when we are called to prayer. Then they are not good, because that is most acceptable fruit which is in due season. Numbers 28:2. The best offerings, if unseasonable, would be unacceptable. Even the actings and exercise of grace, if it be not in season, will not be good fruit. Patience, when we are provoked, is good, but not when we hear God blasphemed. Spiritual rejoicing is excellent fruit, but not while we are called to mourning. The actings of grace have a more particular goodness in their proper seasons. Faith in hard trials, patience in tribulation, meekness in provocations, contentment in wants, courage in dangers, humility in the midst of applause, crucifiedness to the world, in abundance of it, and a confluence of riches and delights. Here they are excellent fruit. This is their season. Fifthly, good fruit must be sound. A fair skin is not enough to commend fruit for good if it be rotten within. And so is our fruit, if the inward temper and motions of the heart be not correspondent to the outward actions and expressions. If we use the words of a prayer, but the heart doesn't pray, the soul is not in motion towards God, the affections do not go along with our confessions or petitions. Or if we praise God, but make not melody in our hearts, the soul doesn't exalt him. The mind has no high apprehensions of him, no inward motions of loving delight, while our lips speak his praise. This is to draw near unto God with our mouths only. Isaiah 29 verse 13. The fruit is not sound, if the heart is not in it. You offer to God, but the parings are the picture of fruit. Without this, which is to mock God, not to offer the fruit he desires. So when we speak of heavenly or spiritual things, without a spiritual sense of what we speak, when we relieve our brethren, but without inward affection or compassions to them, when we put the outward conversation in some handsome order, but neglect the temper and posture of the inward man, this is but such fruit as the Pharisees bore. Matthew 23, verses 25 to 28. Whatsoever appear in your words and actions, if the heart tolerate unruly passions, or harbor unmortified lusts, or give free way to selfish, carnal, earthly inclinations, your fruit cannot be sound at heart. You may please yourselves or others with it, but God will never count it good. If it have the outward shape of fruit, yet there is worms and vermin in it, it is good for nothing. Number 2, for the quantity, it ought to be much. John 15, 5 and 8. There should be a fullness of fruit. Those that enjoy the means must not only bring forth fruit, but be fruitful, should bear abundance. Heart and life should be filled with it. Philippians 1:11. You don't count that a fruitful tree when 1 or 2 branches only bear fruit and the rest have nothing but leaves, or when each branch has a fig or 2, but when all the boughs are full. It is not fruitfulness when there are 2 or 3 berries in the top of the uttermost bough, or 4 or 5 in the outmost branches, as the expression is. Isaiah 17, verse 6. Every branch should have fruit and should bear some plenty of it. Both heart and life should bear fruit, and every branch of both. Every power of the soul and every part of the life must bring forth plenty, abundance of it. Philippians 4:17, fruit that may abound. The mind should be filled with knowledge and taken up with good thoughts. The heart should bring forth good inclinations, holy intentions, spiritual affections, all the graces of the Spirit, and should abound therein. Love, upon which the other affections depend, should abound, and we must abound in every grace if we would be fruitful. Unless we will be barren and unfruitful, these graces, all of them, must not only be in us, but abound. And there must be fruit in the outmost branches too, in the conversation. This should be full of fruits, ready to bring forth every good word and work. Scriptural knowledge and good thoughts are but some fruit in the uppermost branch. If the other boughs be bare, the tree is far from being fruitful. Good inclinations, purposes, desires are but as some berries in the middle boughs. A tree may be barren for all these, and good words or works are but fruit in the outmost branches. A tree is not full of fruit, and so not fruitful, if all the main branches do not bear and bring forth plenty. Mind and heart and life must bring forth fruit in some abundance. Knowledge should abound in the mind. Holy affections and spiritual graces should abound in the heart. And out of the abundance of the heart should the mouth speak. And all other parts act for God, so as to be always abounding in the work of the Lord. Secondly, a proportionableness to the means of fruitfulness, to the plenty and power of them, so much as will answer the care and pains is taken with them. If a man take more pains, and be it more charge in opening the roots of a tree, and dunging it, and pruning it, in fencing and watering it, and it brings forth less or no more fruit than another that has no such care and pains taken with it, it will scarce pass for a fruitful tree. That is, a barren ground which brings forth less, after all care and culture, than that which has less tillage. Those who enjoy the gospel in great light and power, who have the mysteries of it clearly discovered, practically enforced, and brought home to the mind, conscience, will, and affections, so as a light, force, and influence of it may reach the whole man, the whole life, and have this continued many years, if they bring not forth more fruit than such as have the gospel, but not with such advantages, under a less powerful and advantageous ministry of it. They are woefully defective in fruit-bearing, for we are told, Luke 12:48, men expect more from those to whom they have committed much, and so does the Lord. And those that answer not his expectation in a case where reason and equity amongst men justify it, are sinfully defective in the quantity of what they bring forth. Thirdly, it must be lasting fruit, continuance, of which in three particulars. The fruit they bear must continue. It must not wither and come to nothing before the Lord of the vineyard come to reap it. The Apostle Jude speaks of some trees whose fruit withers, and in the next word says they are trees without fruit. So that withering fruit is no fruit in the language and account of the Spirit of God. And trees that bear no other fruit are barren, i.e., trees without fruit. Secondly, they must continue bearing fruit. The good ground did approve itself to be good, because it brought forth fruit with patience, Luke 8:15, which may as well be rendered according to the import of the word, and more congruously as to the sense of the expression, with perseverance. They only are good and fruitful ground who persevere and hold out bearing fruit. A tree that bears the first year, but afterwards brings forth little or nothing, may be cut down amongst those that do but cumber the ground. The Galatians, who made a fair show of fruit at first, but afterwards intermitted, are bewailed by the apostle as barren, and such on whom he had lost his labor, Galatians 4:11, number 3. They must be bearing it always, not only semper, as a tree that fails not of fruit once a year, but ad semper, as if a tree should bear fruit all the year long. Application number 1. This leads us to take up a lamentation for the barrenness of the place, the unfruitfulness of the people of this land. No people under heaven that have the gospel and the means of fruitfulness, with more advantage than we, no people from whom the Lord might expect more and better fruits than from us. But when he comes year after year seeking fruit, what does he find amongst us? How few are there in comparison that bring forth good fruit? How much fewer that bring forth much fruit? How many that bring forth little or nothing but leaves? Nay, well were it with us if the generality of this people did not, instead of good fruit, bring forth cursed fruit. Instead of that which should please the Lord, bear that which is a high provocation to him. And how may the Lord take up that complaint against us, which he did of old by the prophet Isaiah? He planted us in a very fruitful hill, and we have turned into a Sodom. He fenced us to keep out cattle and wild beasts. And those that are fenced in are turned wild beasts, beasts of prey. He gathered out the stones of it, and yet it has almost all become stony ground. He planted it with the choicest vine, and it has become a degenerate plant, and brings forth grapes of gall. He built a tower in the midst of it, a place for the keepers of it, most convenient for oversight, and it is turned into a Babel. He made a winepress in it, sent priests and prophets to press the people to obedience, and instead of pressing out that pleasant liquor, grateful to God and man, it is made use of to press the souls and consciences of those that are obedient. He looked for grapes, and behold, wild grapes. He looked for choice fruit, and behold, corrupt, rotten, and poisonous fruit. He looked for such fruit as the choicest plants bring forth, but our vine is the vine of Sodom. He looked for judgment. He looked for the fruits of holiness, and behold, the most horrid profaneness, contempt of God, rejecting of his gospel, perverting of his ordinances, corrupting of his worship, profaning of his name, of his day, superstition, atheism, infidelity, blasphemy, and overflowing perjury. He looked for the fruits of righteousness, and behold injustice, violence, blood-guiltiness, outrageous intemperance, brutish, impudent uncleanness. Behold all those abominations, and more and worse than all those for which the Lord had a controversy with degenerate Israel of old. Hosea 4, 1-3. Therefore does the land mourn, because the people of it do not mourn for these rebellions. Therefore do those that dwell therein languish, and complain of a general consumption. We declare our sin as Sodom, and we that should have been the best people in the world have made ourselves worse generally, and more vile than many of the heathen. Some dim, weak principles of morality prevailed more with many of them than the gospel and all its evidence and power has prevailed with thousands and thousands amongst us. We justify those nations whom God has destroyed, those churches which he has laid desolate for their provocation. We seem to outvie them all in wickedness. And is there not something that aggravates our rebellions against God and heightens the provocation of them above what can be found amongst others? Clear light and greater mercies and mighty strivings with us in the ministry of the gospel. And besides this, the impudence, incorrigibleness, and universalness of our unfaithfulness, shall I say, that is too mild a word, of our gross abhorred wickedness, testifies against us. We have got a whore's forehead. We despise shame. We glory in our shame. We boast of that at which the sun may blush. We harden our faces as a rock, and he that would bring us to shame shall but dash himself against it. It is a shame not to bring forth good fruit, and he that speaks but of the fruits of the Spirit will be derided. We are incorrigible. The Lord has been pruning us to prevent the bearing of this cursed fruit, and he has done it with a severe hand, has made us bleed again and again, and after all we grow wilder and wilder, and our luxuriances sprout out in greater length and number. He has laid the axe to the root of the tree, year after year, yea, given some terrible strokes, and threatened that he will not allow us still to be a growing reproach to him and to his gospel, but all to no purpose. Nay, he has cast many thousand fruitless branches into the fire before our eyes, and by this showed what the rest may expect. But what effect has had all this upon us? We seem not only past shame, but past fear. We outdare heaven and sin in the face of God when he appears most terrible. When he is revealing his wrath from heaven against our sin, we set at naught his dreadfulest judgments, but rush through plague and sword and fire in our course of rebellion, and say in effect, Tush! We regard not what the Almighty has done or can do to us. And this is growing universal. All flesh, all sorts corrupting themselves. Wickedness is mounted aloft, and in subduing the nation, and having all advantages, finds little resistance. It goes on in triumph. It has been too hard for that which should make the greatest opposition. The sword of justice is turned another way. The sword of the Spirit is hid too much in corners. What can stop it? What weapon is there formed against it? Who can check its successful progress? It comes in like a mighty flood, has borne down all its banks. Its roarings are as the noise of many waters. It is a deluge, and as to these nations, like to prove universal. And what will be the issue of this? What heart does not tremble that considers it? If we brought forth no fruit, none that is good, that is enough to provoke God to cut us down, as you see in this parable. But what when we bring forth gall and wormwood? When instead of good fruit our branches are full of caterpillars and vermin? When we are so far from bringing forth pleasant fruits, as we bear in abundance that which God abhors, how shall we escape? How dreadfully shall we fall? By what a terrible stroke may we expect to be cut down? And what shall secure us from it? Who shall intercede for us? The vine dresser did plead and prevail here with the Lord of the vineyard for some forbearance of the fruitless fig tree. But our vine dressers, where are they? Are not thousands driven out of the vineyard? They may not dig about it nor dung it. They must use a means to prevent its ruin. And those that remain, too many of them mind something else and content themselves with other fruits than the Lord looks for. Oh, how much have we done to render our condition hopeless and past remedy? What need is there of mourning and great lamentation? What necessity of strong cries and great wrestlings to prevent the woeful consequences of our unfruitfulness in all that is good and desirable, our fruitfulness in all that is provoking, and in that which is most so? How highly are they concerned who bear any good fruit to bring forth still more and better, that so when the tree, the nation, is an eyesore to God, and the very sight of it provokes him to cut it down by some astonishing strokes, yet seeing some branches well replenished with fruit that he takes pleasure in, he may yet spare the whole a little longer. Used to, for exhortation. If those that enjoy the means of fruitfulness ought to bring forth, then are you highly concerned to take notice of it as your duty, to be fruitful and to comply with the Lord in it. The Lord has vouchsafed you the gospel and a means of grace. He has planted you by the rivers of waters in a very fruitful place. He has been a dew unto you, and has watered you with a first and latter rain. He has sent his laborers amongst you, one after another, and has employed them to dig about you, and dung and water you, to take all pains, use all means, to spend their time, their parts, their strength, themselves for this purpose. He has been pruning you by judgments and afflictions, and by this been lopping off whatever might hinder you from being fruitful. He has warned you by what has befallen others for their barrenness. He calls upon you by his word, by his providence. He has declared it to be your duty, indeed, the sum of all that he requires of you, that upon which hang all the law and the prophets. The whole duty of man, the whole duty of Christ's disciples is fruitfulness. And indeed, if he had never commanded it, never required it in the Scripture, never spoken one word for it, yet what he has done to you has made it your duty, a duty of greatest moment, and indispensably so. The means of fruitfulness you have enjoyed obliges you strongly to bring forth fruit, and to bring forth good fruit. The plenty of them engages you to bring forth much fruit. The continuance of them calls upon you to continue fruitful. If you don't answer this call and these engagements, you will be inexcusable, for there is nothing more equal than this which the Lord requires of you. You will involve yourselves in dreadful guilt, for there is nothing more sinful than barrenness in these circumstances. You expose yourselves and all that is dear to you to the greatest hazards, for there is nothing more dangerous than unfruitfulness in this case. You bereave yourselves of the blessed advantages which attend fruitfulness, or the happy consequences of it. Let me enforce this duty on you a little more largely by these considerations now pointed out first. Consider the equity of it. It is a duty grounded upon the greatest equity, that those who enjoy the means of fruitfulness should be fruitful. It is so equal that the Lord appeals to the judgment of those from whom he requires it, the case being so clear that their own consciences cannot but give sentence in favor of it. Isaiah 5:3-4. And these inhabitants of Jerusalem to whom he refers it were parties, verse 7. When the Lord has done all that is requisite to render a people fruitful, there needs no other judge, no other witnesses against them but their own consciences if they are found barren. The case is so plain, a party may be trusted to give sentence in it. And is this not your case? May not the Lord say of you as he did of his vineyard of old, what could have been done more to make you fruitful that I have not done? If after this you bring not forth such fruit as he expects, you will be self-condemned. There will need no more evidence to cast you than what your own consciences will bring in against you. If there were no other judge to pass sentence against you, your own consciences will do it. It may be now your conscience is asleep, and you are too busy to attend to its sentence, but affliction or death or judgment will awake it and force you to hearken to it. And these are not far off, though you may dream so. The time is at hand when your consciences will justify the Lord in his severest proceedings against you for your barrenness. Set yourself before the judgment seat of Christ, where you must shortly stand, and suppose he should demand of you, where could I expect fruit if not in the place where you were planted? Where should I look for fruit but in my vineyard? Should I look for it in the wilderness? From whom should I expect more and better fruit than from you, to whom I vouchsafed a means of fruitfulness with greatest advantages?